Okay, let's go.
Scott, how you been?
Good. Yeah, this will be interesting this
Uh,
morning.
yeah, I will. How is the horseback riding up in the mountains?
It's as good as it gets. We sure need
You
snow
lucky.
here, but yeah, riding a nice pony up in the hills, that's about as good as it gets.
I envy you.
I envy myself when I'm
Okay.
doing that.
Scott, we had some really good input in our last video in the intro. Uh, could we discuss some of those thoughts and questions? Maybe make this podcast about that.
Okay, yeah, on one condition that you don't make me look dumb.
That's two-way traffic.
Yeah, some questions can be hard.
Yeah, they can. Okay, now there was a question. Somebody maybe misunderstood you and thought that you said justice is the highest. I don't think you believe that way because of our past conversations, but could you explain a little bit the correlation between justice and love?
Yeah, that is a good question. I don't, yeah, this is the answer, I believe. You don't have to choose.
Okay.
You don't choose between justice and love. Justice is the foundation of love.
Okay.
You can't have love without justice. Actually, you can claim it, and I've had a lot of that. I remember I was in a bad situation with a religious denomination, and they repeatedly told me that they love me, but there was a lot of damage being done. So those are empty words. So I think the thing to understand, the way to look at this is justice, just like the foundation is what the house sits on, justice is what love sits on. And you first get the foundation right, and then in this realm of what we would call love, where you can exercise and practice love, practice being, love is a verb, there's liberty. There's not so much liberty with law. When you're talking about justice, that's like the Apostle Paul said, the law is good if you use it lawfully. The law is a very dangerous thing to pick up, because when you pick it up, it's going to operate on you as well.
Right.
So justice is about law, and you have to get that right. But once you've satisfied the requirements of the law, then above that, all the way to the heavens, is that space of freedom where you can love.
Okay, so here's a question. The root word of justice is just. So who decides what just is?
We all know, the whole world knows what justice is. Now there can be confusion on the fringes, on the edges, but basically anybody that goes off on a trip and comes home and finds their village razed and their family abducted or murdered knows that that's not right. They know that.
Yes.
They don't have to be taught that. They know that. So cultural evolution has muddied the waters on the fringes of what justice would be, but basically we generally know as the collective human race what justice is. And that's why Paul in Romans 2, he talks about, he said, even the Gentiles who don't have the written law, they have a law written on their heart. That is precisely the law that you and I are here to talk about, Stuart, is that moral law written on the heart, not the written religious law, but the moral law that's common to every person walking this planet. And I suppose if you're in a really bad environment, bad company corrupts good morals, that you could be conditioned and brainwashed to actually believe that stealing is okay and those kind of things. But generally, that's not the case. We know as a collective that it's wrong.
Okay, I can go a little deeper than that. I'm sure you've studied Pavlov's experiment,
Yeah.
preconditioned response. He started out trying to diagnose some digestive problems in the dogs, But then when he rang a bell, every time he rang a bell just before feeding, he noticed they began to salivate before the food came. And I really think the human race has a lot of preconditioned responses. And you talked about being in a bad situation with a denomination. I don't think that's uncommon, Scott. I think a
No.
lot of people have. I think a lot of. I mean, I had a man tell me that he and his wife were going to church, and the Sunday school teacher and his wife got involved, and so then, of course, they divorced, and then the deacon came and told him it'd probably be better if he went to a different church, because he said we're trying to salvage as much as we can salvage.
Wow. That's not a very positive note. That's not what you say when you found the pot at the end of the rainbow.
I don't think so. So there was neither love nor justice in that.
Right. Let's dig in a little bit deeper.
But the man believed it, Scott. He believed that he was. So is that a preconditioned response, or is bad values, or what?
I don't know, but I do know this: that 30 years ago, I believed all kinds of things I don't believe now. So that's all part of the process. But let's look into this thing of justice a little bit more. It's so important. Think about the Pledge of Allegiance, for example, and it ends with this phrase. Am I right about this? And liberty and justice for all.
Yes.
Why didn't the founders say and liberty and love for all? What do you think, Stuart? Why didn't they say love for all? Why did they say justice for all?
Well, I think you made a good point when you said love is built on the foundation of justice. You know, the Bible, when it talks about justice, it almost always connects it with righteousness.
Exactly. So we're doing thought experiments now, and we're taking life, putting it into a test tube, doing some synthesis and reaching some conclusions. So here's another little thought experiment for you. Let's suppose you're working at a job, or you're in any environment, and a coworker or a boss just royally screws you over, really defrauds you. What's your unguarded, spontaneous response, the mental response to that? Is it, well, they didn't treat me in a loving way, or is it, that's not fair? Which one is it?
Well, it's anger because it's not fair.
It's not fair.
That's the healthy response.
So why is that? Why do we say, well, that's not fair, instead of saying, well, that they didn't act towards me in a loving way? Why is that? See, I think we're getting to something here. We're digging into something that's very intrinsic in our nature. We first want justice before we want love. And I think this is the reason, is because the word love is so ambiguous, and it's thrown around, bandied about so freely. It's like the US dollar. In 1971, we went off Bretton Woods. We could no longer, Nixon made a declaration, we can no longer convert the US dollar to gold. That's going off Bretton Woods in 1971. So we were no longer anchored to something of tangible value. Now, people, not only, and not just church people, this is often in popular music and that kind of thing, talking about love, love, love. It's used so much, it's like the Federal Reserve printing US dollars. But is it convertible? Is it convertible to something tangible? See, if you pay me a check, if you give me a bill that's love, I want to be able to convert that to justice. If I can't convert it to justice, then it's just worthless paper.
It's empty words.
It's empty words. So the word love is so ambiguous and is so overused by people who don't use love as a verb, will practice injustice, but they say they're loving. I can hardly use it anymore. And actually, I don't. You've known me for a few years. You'll hardly ever hear me talk about love ever, because the word doesn't have guardrails. The word justice, it's not perfect, but it has guardrails built into it. So that's probably all I would want to say on that topic for the moment, anyway.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next one. we had a thought, and I'm going to call it that what you and I are doing is intellectualism versus true spirituality. This person basically said when you have true spirituality, you don't have intellectualism. Now,
Oh,
I want to qualify. I want to qualify that because
I'm wanting to hop
anytime
in
you
on
add,
that.
anytime that you add ism to the end of the word, it's the belief in.
Right.
So, me personally, I don't believe in my intellect. I believe in God, but I think God gave us an intellect. But you hop in. You say what you want to say.
Yeah, let's go back to the beginning. Where or who is that impartial judge that determines what true spirituality is? Who's that guy? Is it us? Do we grade our own papers? Do we look at all of our neighbors and say, hey, they're not really that serious about knowing what is true, but I'm serious. I'm going through my sacred text with a microscope, and so my spirituality is the true spirituality, not just a counterfeit. Who judges that? Do we grade our own papers?
Well, even in that, you'd have to use your intellect to say that mine's better than somebody else.
This is my thought. When you look into the world of physics and mathematics, it's so perfect and beautiful and elegant, you just cannot believe it. The more you study math and science, I believe the more you're led to a intelligent design, a creator. Those are the physical laws, like the law of gravity. They have their counterpart in the spiritual laws, the laws that we'll be talking about for the next few weeks. And they're perfect, and they're elegant and profound. And why would God make a world so mathematically perfect and give us an intellect? Just think this through, and give us an intellect, and the purpose of that intellect, or the predominant use of it, is to deceive us. And we have to put it aside. We have to put it aside and trust. Okay, what are we going to trust? We've put
our feelings.
We're going to trust. I'm going to get into the zip code law now. The zip code law is where we're born. It's our country. It's our family. It's our denomination. It's everything that goes into our value system, and it depends on our zip code. Once we put away our intellect, the go-to thing we resort to is the zip code law. It's how we're raised. We're going to trust that mom and dad had the truth. I'm going to trust my denomination I was born and raised in has the truth. That's what we're left with.
Yeah.
What else do you have?
Well, the other thing is, Scott, in all of this, there are different learning styles. There are people who, at one end, I'm going to say it this way because I don't want it to be higher or lower. But at this end of the scale is people who are analytical. That's how they learn. On this end, they learn by intuition. Okay, they both have strengths and weaknesses. I would say this end, the intuition is like street smarts. I'm on a chat with two guys, and one is very intuitive, and one's very intellectual, or analytical, I should say. So the intuitive one pops off and says, well, this is the answer. And so we ask him, how do you know? I don't know, I just know. Then the analytical one, he thinks about it for 2 weeks, and he comes back and he says, you're right, because of this and this and this and this and this. Okay, the analytical one would never have started the conversation because he didn't have that, you could call it intuition or inspiration or whatever you want to call it. But then he defines that it is true, or it's not true, or it's partially true. Okay, so I'm thinking that sometimes this question between intellectualism and true spirituality could be the difference of the man who's intuitive, saying, I'm spiritual, I don't have to figure all this stuff out, because he's not capable of figuring it out, and the guy who's analytical and wants answers.
Well, how about this?
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understood exactly what you said. we're not born totally balanced. We're born with a prejudice towards intuition or logic and reason. I get that. How about we
Yeah.
develop what's imbalanced? For example, let's use both. Let's become a force of nature. If we lack the intuitive, let's work on becoming more sensitive to the intuitive way of receiving information. So this, in an ideal world, this is how and I could be wrong. These are my thoughts, and you can judge it. The intuition brings us like the ore, the gold or silver ore, but it's kind of in a very rough form. That's how the ideas are introduced to us through, you might say, through that form of, or that media of intuition. But the intuition, as you have mentioned, works until it doesn't. I think your coach told you that once. It works until it doesn't.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So then, once we have that boxcar load of ore, then we go to work on it, analyzing it, assessing it, to see what's value and see what needs to just go in the rubble heap. But the bottom line is this: I'm going to come against the entire religious world that believes that the intellect is dangerous, and say the intellect is actually God's gift to us. This world is full of many untruths and half-truths, partial truths. And if we're not going to use our intellect to sort it, we're just going to start guessing or go back to the zip code law. I believe that God knew that this world can be confusing in terms of what is true. And so the intellect is the best gift we have, because if we use it honestly, it will lead us to the moral law.
Okay, to add to that, Scott, our out of the gate response to anything that comes into us, into our brain, is the emotions. So you hear of something and you have an emotional response. Then, as you have developed critical thinking skills by doing what we're doing now, thought experiments, abstract thinking, what ifs, then you say, okay, but that might not be the whole story. Let me dig in a little deeper and find out the whole story. So that requires you to use your intellect.
It does.
So when you dig in a little deeper, and then it completely twists. The story can completely twist because you find facts that you didn't initially know of.
Well, think about this. You mentioned feedback, and we'll talk about feedback as a principle specifically down the road. Let's say you receive some feedback, you receive some criticism.
Yeah.
How do the emotions respond? The emotions don't like it. It's an existential crisis. No. It really is an existential crisis. I'm wrong. Well, if I'm wrong, my whole world falls apart. So the feelings say, no, that needs to go in the trash. It's the intellect that comes in and operates as a government, an administrative force over the feelings that say, wait a minute, okay, feelings, I see that you're not feeling good. And this makes you, this worries you, you might even be having a panic attack. But still, we might need to take a look at this. So a baby in an adult body conflates feelings as right and wrong. In other words, if something makes you feel good, then it's true. If something makes you feel bad, then it must be false, and it goes in the trash. As we develop and mature the administrative part of our mind to actually become a government over those feelings and begin to manage them.
Amen. I'm in the amen corner on that one.
Okay. I'm with you, brother.
Scott, we've been talking some pretty tough stuff. It's time for an illustration here. The reason I ask you about horse riding is when I'm in nature, I normally reflect and hear from God. I can also do it in church, but this particular illustration I want to give you is when I was in nature. I walked up to a tree from this direction, and it was so hollow, I said I could push that tree over. Then I came to it from this direction, and it looked perfect. And I looked up when I was here to see if it had any dead branches or leaves. and it didn't have any, which was a shocker. All right, let's say this is intuition, and this is being analytical or intellectual. Okay, you probably are more in the intellectual side, okay? But people tend to camp out on their viewpoint. And they say, no, 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 Scott, this tree is worthless because it's hollow. And you say, yeah, but I'm looking at it and it's perfect. It's political, religion, everything. We have different viewpoints. So when I thought about that for months, and I'm going to introduce one more, not only intellectual and intuition, but I think you can have inspiration. And I know you've told me you have those aha moments where did it come from? We don't know. I think it comes from God if you're seeking the truth. So then several months later, I was thinking about this tree, and God said, well, you're looking, I say God because I believe in God. Some people say source or whatever.
I understand.
He said, you're looking at this tree like a man. And I said, well, how am I supposed to look at it? And God said to me, I look at it from above. I know it's connected because it's bearing fruit. So from then on, I tried to develop relationships with people who have radically different viewpoints than me, because they can see something I cannot see. Now, I know that you and I don't think the same on a lot of things. You have different viewpoints, but I don't kick it out because you can see things that I can't see. You said earlier in the discussion, maybe they need to develop their intuition a little more, or maybe they need to develop, and that's true to a point, but I think some people just don't have it. So then we need someone else. We need someone else in our life. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there is such a thing as leaders and mentors and thought leaders and mentors and that kind of thing, for sure. And some people were just designed, have a natural proclivity to operate at the frontier, at the edge of things.
The next thing on the list is somebody asked about the inner voice or relationship versus the outer voice. Do we want to talk about that now, or do you want to make a subject out of it?
We can do that quickly because you mentioned idolatry. We were talking about this in the last podcast, and how the sacred text, whether that's the Quran or the Bible or the text XYZ, how that can become an idol. And that is so true. It's worth mentioning again. In fact, we ought to mention in every podcast probably, is whenever that external authority, that voice of external authority, be it your sacred text, your minister, your family, your culture, whatever it is, whenever that speaks louder to you, has more authority over you than that moral law that is written on your heart that tells you what is right and wrong, that has become idolatry.
Scott, help me through this in a practical way. If somebody has been preconditioned to believe certain things, okay, the Bible talks about their conscience is seared. How do they activate or find the moral law that's written on their heart?
I don't know. You are at the beginning of the Big Bang, so to speak. We're at the beginning of that question of why somebody decides to take what is called the hero's journey. I don't know about that decision. I know what the journey looks like, but I don't know about the actual thing that compels you to make that decision. I don't know.
But don't you think a big component is I want to know the truth?
Yeah, but what makes one person want to know the truth more than another? See, that's a mystery to me.
Yeah, that is a mystery. Who was it said some people prefer the certainty of misery over the misery of uncertainty? Some people do not like this uncertainty.
Dr. James Hollis, he's a psychoanalyst and an incredibly intelligent man. He says one mark of maturity is the ability to entertain mystery. and uncertainty. You don't have to know. You can just hold it in your hand and just let it be there and wait for more information to come in. You don't have to nail it down before you know the facts.
Yeah, my pastor, preacher in the U.S., we call him Butch. He loves to take what looks like conflicting scriptures. Like one scripture says, "Work out your soul, your salvation with fear and trembling," and the other one says, "Therefore there remaineth a rest." He loves to take those and balance them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not in contradiction.
Yeah.
But some people kick out one and they're heavy on the working it out, and the other people kick the working it out and they're heavy on the rest. So
we're all trying to figure it out, aren't we? All of us are trying to figure it out if we're honest. But I'd like to add one more example to this thing of idolatry. It's such a simple example. Let's say that you're in denomination XYZ, and they teach a certain thing. They say this is how you follow that you obey God. I mean, like, who are you to doubt the sacred text? Well, not me. I'm not anybody to doubt God, you know. They actually conflate trusting God with conflating with their believing in their interpretation of God. Those are two very different things. They treat that as the same thing. But let's say they have a doctrine or a teaching that would cause you to harm others. And so your conscience is bothering you. The moral law written on your heart says, no, I don't think that's right to do that to that person. But your church doctrine or your minister or whatever you trust in says, no, you need to do this. And then you say, well, I don't trust myself. I don't trust my intellect. That'd be one way of looking at it. So I'm just going to trust that God has put good leaders over me, and I will go ahead and engage in this behavior. You are then engaged in idolatry. You have created a source of authority that is larger than the Creator himself.
Yeah, that's the problem. Where the system of religion is above your relationship with God, your personal relationship
and
with
above
God.
The voice of God that is basically the moral law written on your heart. So
that's really something that we need to continue to flesh out, though. And I think probably the people who are going to be attracted to this podcast are people who are seekers.
yeah, exactly.
It's not going to be people.
You gave me a nice little segue there. Well, what if I get it wrong? So I start to say, okay, maybe my minister or my denomination or my parents or my culture, my zip code law doesn't have it right. So I'm going to actually begin to trust my inner connection to source and follow that. What if I get it wrong? Well, what if? This is a process. If God is just and if God is benevolent towards us and cares about us, he sees that we're in a process. We're looking, we're testing things, we're trying things. There's actually a verse in the New Testament that says, test all things and hold fast to that which is true. We're going to get things wrong. But what is sacred is the process, the liberty to do the journey and not just trust the zip code law that we're born with.
I think we're ready. We've pretty well answered most of the comments.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Stuart.
Enjoyed the discussion. Yep.
Take care.
Take care.